This is Elizabeth Griffin, the Black romance writer, and we are almost at the end of the year 2023. In about 2 hours, we will be ushering in a new year, and I'm so excited and I just can't wait. And as I promised, I will be working on New Year's Day, and I am creating this video to usher in the new year. So you may be wondering, what topic will I be talking about on New Year's Eve? What writing information would I like to contribute and give to you on New Year's Eve? Well, let me tell you, I want to talk about erotica, erotic romance, erotic material, adult material. But this material isn't geared towards women. These type of stories that I want to discuss in this video are geared towards men. Do you know that there is a segment of our male population who loves to read erotic romances or erotica? They may not call them romances, but there is a group of men who enjoy the salacious, delicious reading and the things that men require from erotic novels are different than what women require and desire. How do I know this? Because I accidentally stumbled into writing erotica for men. It wasn't intentional. It wasn't even on my mind. I always assumed that whatever I wrote, men would not find interesting. It would only appeal to women. And that was all right with me because I'm a romance writer. However, in 2015, I discovered something interesting and something unique. So let's go back in time. In 2015, while riding my bicycle through the city of Philadelphia, I often would read Spanish newspapers because I'm working on my Spanish. And this particular newspaper caught my attention. It was a beautiful woman on the cover, and her mouth was taped up. And immediately, I wondered, what is that about? What's going on there? So I decided to stop my bike. I grabbed the newspaper, and then I started translating it. And what I found was that this particular article was talking about human trafficking. I never thought about human trafficking. It was never on my radar. I just assumed that type of slavery didn't exist anymore. In fact, I thought most types of slavery were outdone and outdated. However, I found out that there is human trafficking. There is all kinds of things going on. And there are different types of human trafficking. There's sexual human trafficking, and there's also labor human trafficking. And then we can also talk about organ donations, and we can go down this long, horrid road. But for this particular video, I want to talk about my discovery. In writing Cargo, which is talking about human trafficking, I had no idea anyone would be interested in my story. It was just something that moved me and I wanted to write. So it is a novella, and I wrote it in about a week. I published it as an ebook, and for about a year, it just sat there. No sales, nothing, no attention. Then all of a sudden, to my surprise, it started to sell in the UK. It started to sell in Germany. It started to sell in Australia. I was so surprised that this particular story, which gained no interest in the United States, was getting attention outside the country. And then I started to notice something else, another trend. Most of the people that were reading my story were not women. They were men. And this particular story didn't have a lot of sexual activity in it, but it was the subject matter and there was some romance. Whatever the combination that I captured in the story, it resonated with male readers, which got me to thinking, do men like to read erotica? Do men like to read these type of salacious, sexy stories? And if so, what is the difference between what men read and what women read? So I created a pen name, E.F. Griffin, and this is the pen name that I write my political romances or my political eroticas under. I write my interracial eroticas under, and any other type of naughty literature that I deem worthy to go under that branding. So, as I said, I stumbled into erotica for men, but because I wrote one story, it didn't mean I understood the genre that I was delving into. So I started to do research. I started to look at the naughty books that are on Amazon that are geared towards men. And they are a lot of them interracial. And one thing I noticed is I found the covers distasteful. I'm not judging anyone's work. However, for me, I found them to be lurid and lewd and just not attractive at all. So the first thing I decided is I wanted to make my covers titillating, sexy, and appealing. So if you look at the covers of my titles, Cargo, His Winter Wonderland, you will see that attempt. I also wanted to write stories that were graphic in writing, but I wanted to also capture the sensuality and the erotica of a story. I wanted the characters to meet and to be drawn to each other sexually and physically, and to show that in the writing. But I also wanted to give these stories a strong plot, a strong storyline. So, in addition to having hot, salacious, descriptive sex, I would also give a strong plot. And in thinking about these stories, it took me back to my teenage years. I would go to used bookstores and I would be looking for romance novels. And I did not realize that in these used bookstores, there were books that were published in the 1950s and in the 1960s. Their covers were missing, but these books were very racy, very erotic, and they were written for men. This was adult literature for men, and it was pervasive. And I found them in a lot of used bookstores. So I also relied on what I read and how those stories were very sexual in nature, very graphic in nature, and very satisfying at the end of the read, if I can be so blunt as to say. In conducting my research on writing erotica for men, I find that lots of times men would like to read about relatable males, the average everyday male. For example, the bus driver, or a businessman, or a teacher. They would like to see themselves in those roles, and they live out their fantasy through those characters. There can also be the spies and the adventurers. They can relate to those too. But from what I understand is a lot of men like to see themselves in these stories that they read, and they also like to see graphic detail, sexual acts going on. So this is not all men that I'm describing, but from my research, this is some of the things that I'm hearing men like and they like to relate to. I'm also hearing that some men have moved or transitioned from adult male magazines and adult videos. They have transitioned from that to literature, erotic literature, or erotic writing, because it is more intimate, more personal, and more relatable. And it is realistic. From what I understand, they like the conversations to be realistic. They like the events and the activities in the books to be realistic and relatable. And sometimes when you view adult entertainment, such as videos or magazines, you get that illusion, you get that distance. You don't get that personal touch that you can get through reading a book. And I also understand that men appreciate the written handheld book as opposed to using the computer.